to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Friday morning, the 13th of March, 2026, with 31 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where it's beautiful, bright, and sunny on this Friday morning. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you did enjoy the action from last night in the UEFA Europa League. For those of you that are interested in football as a sport in general, but also more importantly, for any of you that may have had teams playing in there last night, we did witness the likes of Aston Villa win, while Nottingham Forest, unfortunately, got beat. I do not know what that implies for Vitor Pereira in regards to his role as interim boss. Not even interim boss. He has a 1.5 year contract as a Nottingham Forest manager. But suffice to say that the result didn't go his way just as much as it did not go the way of Crystal Palace, at least not in the manner that they had hoped when they were up against Larnaca, and it ended in a goalless draw. So the conditions were incredibly tough on the night. It was raining, heavily raining. Suffice to say, raining cats and dogs there in Nottingham or at the City ground, just as much as it was at Selhurst Park. So we'll be discussing a little bit of that and perhaps more, but more importantly, we'll be looking forward or starting to look forward to the weekend ahead. Finally, the Premier League returns and Man United fans will be excited. And the reason as why I say that is because the last time it feels like ages ago that we watched Manchester United play football. And Jesus Christ. And the funny thing is, after match day 31, it's going to be even longer. And the reason for that is because after match day 31, which will be next weekend, we're going to go into the match international break. And yet upon resumption of football, upon return from the match international break, the first set of games that will be played will be the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. That means Man United will still not play. So they will have to wait until the subsequent weekend, meaning Manchester United will have a period of no less than 3 weeks, 21 plus days without kicking a ball, without a game of football. I don't know what they're going to be doing that, because usually 3 weeks is almost the equivalent of an entire preseason. Because, let's be honest, when the season ends in May, usually players return after the first week of July. After the first week of July, when they get to their, preseason engagements. What do football players eat before a game? Your guess is as good as mine, Steve. But I would suspect they do not eat heavy food, depending on how much period there is prior to the game. And I'll tell you that because I know for a fact what used to happen to Ugandan players. And this is a story that was narrated or that was told by a former Ugandan football player, Mike Mutiaba. Unfortunately for him, I've seen he's been suspended or banned from football because of match fixing, but that's not the story I want us to get into. But he said whenever they went away for intercontinental games, what those usually in North Africa, what the Arabs would do, they would stockpile them with food and bring all the fancy food, bring a lot of chicken, the things that you do not normally eat. Sort of think about that fancy food, or maybe not fancy, but that sort of unique food in a way that does not come to you very often. So they bring that, and then you get excited about the food, then you eat a lot of food, and then the next day you can hardly run, So in other words, at the professional level of the game, I cannot tell you specifically what they eat, but I know that they live under strict diets, and particularly when it comes to a match day, I'm sure it's the responsibility of club chefs to try and find or to prepare the best meal and the most appropriate meal for the day for the players to eat something and before they play the game. I was reading somewhere, and some players said they prefer to eat something very little and then drink more. So it may vary. It may not be cast in stone that this is what they eat or this is what they don't eat, really. But yeah, that's the best I can tell you about that, to the little of my knowledge when it comes to sporting diet and stuff like that. But we'll leave that at that. But thank you so much, Steve, for your question. I kindly like the broadcast if you haven't already, before we continue. Now, I was speaking about Man United, that it's going to take so long. Their games are going to fall far between. For example, on match day 30, they'll play on Sunday because they'll play at home against Aston Villa. And then after that, their subsequent game will be on a Friday against FC Bournemouth. Now, after that, like I said, after the subsequent weekend, we'll go away for the international break. And they have 3 weeks, an entire 3 weeks, by themselves, to themselves. Absolutely. So you can imagine, what that must feel like to be a Man United fan. And I say that because, hello, GFT, hello, good morning, how are you doing? It must be really either miserable or very fun to be a Man United fan. But I'd want to suspect, if you love football as much as we do, or at least I would want to think so, then it will be very boring. Somebody recently said, and make no mistake, I do not mean this in a condescending way or to throw shade on the competition, but somebody really recently said, and I suspect they could be a Manchester United fan or otherwise, they said FA Cup weekends are more boring than international breaks. That was his statement. It was out there on X. I don't remember the person that put it out. And the only conclusion I could rush to was that they were a Manchester United fan because they had played the previous week, midweek, against Newcastle, had lost by 2-1. Now, they knew for a fact that they're not playing over the weekend because Chelsea played, they had the game in the FA Cup, Arsenal played, Liverpool played, Man City played, and that's just about it. In other words, Man United was the only, Man City played. Man United was the only traditional big team that did not play. So it must have felt painful. And then in the aftermath of the weekend, they knew that they did not have any midweek action coming their way for them to watch because they're not anywhere in Europe. They're not in the Conference League, they're not in the Europa League, they're not in the Champions League. But then again, unfortunately for them still, they cannot have their games rescheduled, perhaps to say, yeah, come and play something here. No, it cannot be done. The rules cannot be bent for them. I remember at the start of the season, this was before even the sacking of, before when Ruben Amorim was still in charge, there was growing speculation that Man United was set to organize games outside the UK to try and raise revenue, but more importantly, to keep themselves engaged with the lack of European football. More to their detriment was that they went out of cup competitions quite early on against Grimsby Town in the EFL Cup and subsequently against Brighton in the FA Cup. So it did not do them any favors. So, and then, as if to add assault to injury, is that at the moment, you cannot go and play a game in the Middle East. Why? Because of the ongoing events or the ongoing war between Israel, USA on one side, and Iran on the other. Drones and missiles are flying all over the place and things like that. So it's deemed unsafe. Now, unless it's preseason, we've not known Premier League teams to travel to the USA. So you see where we're getting this with Manchester United. So Manchester United fans, I do feel for you. I know what it means to be there for a period of time without football. And the reason as why I know that firsthand is because when the season ends, it's usually that feeling that I have. Especially when there's nothing really to look forward to. particularly after the UEFA Champions League final is played, and in that summer or subsequently, we do not have any tournaments. For example, in a year when we do not have the Euros, when we do not have the World Cup, when AFCON has already been played or it's not to be played, basically that's just about it. You sort of wake up as a football enthusiast looking forward to absolutely nothing. All there is transfer speculation, right and wrong, gossip or otherwise, fact or material, name it. That's all there is. And it even becomes more ugly around weekend times. There's nothing to look forward to. You know, life is about hope in a larger context. You hope, you look forward to something. You know, do you know how many people feel slightly relieved of whatever burdens them at a given point of time, that there's a game of football to look forward to at the weekend, that whatever team they pay allegiance to is going to play at the weekend? Do not underestimate the gravity or the mental or psychological effect that has on human beings, on people in general. You know, we know that life can be a bit of a dark place to be. It can be challenging in more ways than not, or in more ways than one. That you find yourself caught between a rock and a hard stone. You find yourself feeling out of place. You find yourself blah, 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 whatever the case it may be. Now, it's always very encouraging when you have something to look forward to, when you have something to cling on to say, yeah, that's my happy place. And for many people, football is a place. So every time it's not there, it's always going to be, you know, difficult. Anyways, let's move on. Yesterday, like I told you, UEFA Europa League action was on, and Ollie Watkins scored the only goal as Aston Villa won away against Lille. That's in the first leg of the round of 16. But in the other games, like I told you, Nottingham Forest lost at home against Midtjylland by 1-0. That brilliant header from Wisang came very late in the game, around the 80th minute, and in very tough conditions. Like I said, it was raining cats and dogs in that game. It was raining quite heavily, and so was it in the Crystal Palace game that were playing in the UEFA Conference League. But in the other results, Bologna and AC Roma shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, while Panathinaikos beat up against Real Betis by 1-0. Stuttgart lost to FC Porto by 2-1. Stuttgart were at home. Celta Vigo and Lyon shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, while Ferencváros beat Praga by 2-0. For those of you that are just joining us, welcome to this morning's broadcast. It's Friday, the 13th of March. My name is Robert Kesakos, and I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. Please consider liking the broadcast, but also subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much. Then Genk beat up against Freiburg by 0-0, and that was it for the round of 16 first leg. Of course, the reverse fixtures will be played next week, as is the case with the UEFA Champions League games for the same stage of that competition. And then in the UEFA Conference League, we will not go through all of them, but AZ Alkmaar beat up against Sparta Praha by 2-1. Shakhtar Donetsk beat up against Lech Poznan by 3-1. Strasbourg from France beat up against Rejak by 2-1. And then Samsunspor lost to Rayo Vallecano by 3-1. Crystal Palace were involved in a goalless draw against AEK Larnaca. Fiorentina against Rocco. That one, Fiorentina won it by 2-1, while AEK Athens beat up against NK Celje by 4-0, while then Mainz 05 as well as SK Sigma shared the spoils in a goalless draw. So those were the results from the UEFA Conference League round of 16 as well. The first leg, the reverse fixture, set for next week on Thursday. So without wasting any further ado, let's quickly fly away to the Premier League because action will get underway on match day 30, starting on Saturday. There's no Friday fixture this week, but maybe before we get into those fixtures for the Premier League, we do have some games elsewhere in other than the Premier League. From the Spanish La Liga on Friday kickoff at 11 p.m., Deportivo Aves will be up against Villarreal. In German, Borussia Mönchengladbach will be up against St. Pauli at 10:30 p.m., while at a quarter to 11 p.m., Torino will be up against Parma in the Italian Serie A, and then in the French League One, Olympique Marseille at a quarter to 11 p.m. will be up against Auxerre. That's for the Friday fixtures. Now, the Premier League, of course, takes its Gunnar says, good morning, mate. Good morning to you too. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you looking forward to the weekend? Are you feeling positive? Are you feeling a bit mixed? Who do you support? That badge that you have on your profile is the same team I support. But I love football in general. So for me, football takes precedent. There will be no early kickoff on Saturday for match day 30, but games kick off at 6 p.m. with two games being played. Burnley will be up against AFC Bournemouth at Turf Moor, while Sunderland at the Stadium of Light will welcome Brighton and Hove Albion. At 8:30 p.m., Chelsea will be up against Newcastle at Stamford Bridge, while Arsenal will be at home against Everton. Then in the late kickoff on Saturday, at 11 p.m., West Ham United will entertain Manchester City at the London Stadium there. And then on Super Sunday, we'll have four games played when Crystal Palace take on Leeds at Selhurst Park. That will be at 5 p.m., while Manchester United will be up against Aston Villa at 5 p.m. still. Nottingham Forest will take on Fulham at the same kickoff time, while in the late kickoff at 7:30 p.m., Liverpool will be against Tottenham Hotspurs. And then on Monday Night Football, Brentford will be up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. We know what the stakes are for Wolverhampton Wanderers, but that game won't come until Monday Night Football. So that's the run of fixtures for match day 30 of the Premier League. Very interesting fixtures, by the way. A lot at stake. Man City looking to recover from that embarrassing defeat at the hands of Real Madrid. But I do not think they'll have time to even think about that because the stakes couldn't be any higher for them in their pursuit for Premier League glory because really they find themselves 7 points behind Arsenal. There are chances, but that by the time of kickoff of that particular game, if Arsenal may have won against Everton, they could find themselves 10 points behind with 2 games in hand, possibly. Of course, because they have another game in hand against Crystal Palace that is yet to be rescheduled. It's supposed to be a match day 31 game, and yet next weekend, we all know for a fact that Manchester City are going to be playing a cup final against Arsenal in the EFL Cup at Wembley. So there's plenty to look forward to in that context or in that regard. Meanwhile, regardless of the cup final, the Premier League fixtures will go on as scheduled for match day 31. So please bear that in mind. Then when it comes to Burnley Bournemouth, we know what Burnley, what's in it for Burnley at this stage in the season. Why? Because they are fighting relegation. Their chances of surviving it continue to look slimmer and slimmer by the day because currently, as I speak, they find themselves at least about 9 points away from safety. 9 points. Now, 9 points may sound too little until it is you having to chase them down, or may sound too many until your opponents lose. For example, we have a team in the Premier League, and you will indulge me here. We have a team with the worst form in the Premier League this season, at least in the last 5 fixtures. And that's Tottenham Hotspurs. They've lost all their last 5 games. No other team not even a bottom Wolves, not even a second from bottom Burnley or third from bottom West Ham have had that poor run of form. It's been that bad. It's been that bad, or it is that bad for Tottenham Hotspur. And as reading, I think, a quote by Harry Redknapp, that apparently, coincidentally, he spoke to Daniel Levy, and he does think that if Daniel Levy was still in charge at Tottenham Hotspur, having made the decision to part ways with Thomas Frank, he would have given him the job to try and salvage Tottenham Hotspur's season, So really, that's something to think about. But so anyways, those are the responsibilities, or excuse me, those are the burdens that Burnley will carry into the weekend, So every game is important at this stage of the season for every team for different reasons. Why? Because at the top of the food chain, Arsenal and Manchester City are chasing down the Premier League title. It's the battle for glory. From third to about sixth place, and that's Man United, Aston Villa, Chelsea, Liverpool. The rest is for a top four finish. And from 7th to around 10th to actually 11th, because the difference between 7th and 11th is only 4 points. There's pursuit for a European place. That could be in the UEFA Europa League or the UEFA Conference League. Because again, the disparity of points between a 7th place Brentford and a 5th place Chelsea is only 4 points. I say 5th place because for now, you finish 5th, you're going in the UEFA Europa League. So, in other words, every team has something to fight for. When you go to the bottom, right from Wolverhampton Wanderers up to, let's say, as high as Brighton and Hove Albion, who are 14th on the Premier League globe, it's the race for survival to avoid relegation. Not that Brighton are under a big threat of relegation, but when you do the math mathematically, if they were to lose all their remaining games, which is 9 games, and Wolverhampton Wanderers win all their remaining 8, they could easily finish above them. That's the mathematical bit of it. So, and then you have the teams in between there, this Newcastle's, Crystal Palace, who just have to fight on and finish higher than they currently find themselves on the table. So really, everybody has something to fight for in as far as that Premier League table is concerned. And when you go over and look at excuse me. I don't know why that keeps happening to us, but it does happen. So, when you go over the last 5 fixtures in the Premier League, Burnley have had their fingers burnt. They've won only 1 fixture, they've drawn 1, they've lost the other 3, losing to West Ham, Brentford, and Everton. Really winning away to Crystal Palace and drawing against Chelsea. Bournemouth, on the other side, have been one of those teams that, in recent times, especially going back since the turn of the new year or slightly before or slightly prior, their form has not been that bad. One, shared the Spurs in a 1-1 draw against Aston Villa. They won away against Everton by 2-1, and they've had all the other being consecutive draws. 2 goalless draws, a 1-1 draw against Sunderland. Now, I stand to be corrected, but I do not think on the Premier League log there's a team that has drawn more games than Bournemouth. If any, it could be Sunderland. In fact, it's not even Sunderland. Okay, let's see what the Premier League log looks like. Yes, Bournemouth have had as many as 13 draws in this season. No single other team has had that many draws. No single other team. So, they're a team that is really, really good at drawing games. The first leg in itself, at the Vitality Stadium ended in a 1-1 draw between these two sides. And when you go over, of course, Burnley have a bit of, I don't know, an upper hand on this Bournemouth side. Of course, that's in the historical context of the fixture. Present day, Bournemouth are a better team than Burnley, in my personal opinion. But when you go over the last 5 fixtures, Bournemouth have only won once against Burnley. They've lost 3 and they've drawn 1, which was the 1-1 draw earlier on this season. Unfortunately for Burnley, under the charges of Scott Parker, I do not think they've presented us with enough evidence to trust them to go into a match weekend believing that they are going to win a game of football. Yes, they had a spirited fight in one of their last league outings, particularly against Brentford, which they lost by 3 goals to 4. Sorry, which they lost by 4 goals to 3 and could have finished 4-4 because they had 2 goals ruled out in that game by VAR. But that notwithstanding, they're just not good at winning games. They've only won 4 games across the entire campaign and they have 7 draws. So really, I'm going to go. I wish I would want to believe in them that they can still have a chance about fighting relegation. But to be honest, they're too leaky. Their defense is too leaky that it's conceded as many as 58 goals. I do not think there's a team that has conceded more in the top flight than them, because next to them is West Ham United, who have conceded 54. And behind that is the bottom side, Wolverhampton Wanderers. You can see that even Wolves have not conceded that much. So with the way the shipping goes, I suspect that game will end in a draw. It could be a 2-2 draw or a 1-1 draw. So Burnley, Bournemouth, I'm going for a draw. And I will leave that at that. Quickly into the next fixture that also kicks off at 6 p.m. On Saturday. That's the game between Sunderland and Brighton and Hove Albion at the Vitality Stadium. Now, unfortunately, for Fabian Hatzler, instead of winning games, he spent majority of his time moaning about Arsenal's tactics and time-wasting endeavors. Now, I think in the last 16 games or 17 games, Brighton have won just about maybe 3 games. And you had their manager constantly moaning about Arsenal instead of worrying about his team. There's that famous quote from Suits by Harvey Specter. I don't remember exactly who he was quoting, but he said something in the region of, winners do not blame. No, he said, excuses do not win championships. In other words, Fabian Hatzler, if you notice there's a problem, find a solution to that problem, as opposed to moaning about it. Because while we critique these teams and analyze them, oftentimes, whether our opinions matter or not, we do offer solutions. We do offer our views on how certain teams should be behaving or go about certain games. And that's the beauty of the sport. So for Fabian Hatzler, unfortunately for him, he spent a lot of time moaning about the inefficiencies of other teams or what they do wrong and not focus on what his team can do right. When you go over the last 5 fixtures, they've only won 2. And the one against Brentford by 2-0 and against Nottingham Forest by 2-1. They lost all the other 3 fixtures against Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, and most recently Arsenal by 1-0. On the other side, Sunderland have not had any better form. Really, their last result was a 1-0 victory against Leeds United. I did not think they deserved to win, by the way, because they needed a late penalty that was scored by Habib Diarra to win that game. Prior to that, they had shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw against FC Bournemouth. And more prior to that were 3 consecutive draws against Arsenal, Liverpool, and Fulham, for which in those 3 games, they had conceded 7 goals and scored only 1. In other words, form has not been on Sunderland's side. Unfortunately, there is no Premier League track record history of fixtures that we can look onto to do a benchmark and say, this is how these teams are going to behave. Why? There's only been one Premier League meeting between the two sides, and it ended in a goalless draw between the two sides at this Amex Stadium. Now, I have reason to believe that this could easily end in a draw, but a draw that has some goals in it at the Stadium of Light, because really Sunderland, I think it took until match day 26 for Sunderland to lose their first game of football at home. Unfortunately for them, they lost 2 consecutive home games, and that was against Liverpool by 1-0 and against Fulham by 3-1. I do not think that Regis Riblis, on the backdrop of losing to Port Vale in the FA Cup and getting knocked out by 0-0, will be setting his team up for another round of failure. Really, you could argue they did majority of their good business in the first half of the season. They still need to fight on. Because whereas 40 points, given the context of the season, guarantees their safety, I think they are likely to draw their first game. I think they are likely to draw this game. I don't think they'll lose. With the availability of the likes of Granit Xhaka, the home environment, players like Adelarete, players like Mayenda, Noah Sadiki, Leafy, Habib Diarra, they might do just enough to keep the likes of Danny Welbeck, Kaoru Mitoma at bay. Angel Gomez, Yankuba Minte, Carlos Baleba in that midfield, Yassine Ayari, I do not know how Pascal Grob, usually being played alongside Carlos Baleba, or vice versa, with Pascal Grob alongside Yassine Ayari. We'll wait to see. But for me, I'll go with a 1-1 draw in that one as well. Yeah, too many draws. And then, I don't know. Okay. Quickly, let's move on. We'll skip the Arsenal game. We'll get to it later in the Friday night preview. That game will come, that stream should come at around 9 p.m. East African time, which essentially will be, 6 p.m. UK time, around that. But anyways, so Chelsea, Newcastle United, very difficult fixture. Newcastle United, I do not know whether they have the conviction that they can go to the Camp Nou and win, to have their minds preoccupied, or to have themselves obsessing over that fixture. But if anything had it bad in midweek, Chelsea didn't have it, because they got thrashed by PSG 5-2 in the UEFA Champions League. And prior to that, they had struggled to win against Wrexham 4-2 in extra time in the FA Cup. So they need to pick themselves up and put up quite a performance. Their last Premier League outing was away to Aston Villa, where they won by 4-1. Beautiful performance, scintillating from Joao Pedro, who scored a hat-trick. There's not much you can blame on him, really. Aside from that, prior to that, they had lost to Arsenal by 2-1, a worthy opponent. They had 2 consecutive draws against Leeds and Burnley, and then they also beat Wolves. Liam Monsignor's Premier League record is one that is good enough. I think he's managed them through about 8 games now? Yeah, about 8 games. And he's lost only 1. He's won 6. No, he's won 5. He's lost 1 and drawn 2. That's the best of my knowledge. So that's a record good enough. He comes up against a Newcastle side for whom, with all their strength in squad and quality, things have not largely gone their way in the Premier League. In their last league outing, they had a very spirited fight, down against 10 men following the sending off of Jacob Ramsey, and beat up against Man United by 2-1. But that sort of felt like a one-off for a season that has seen Newcastle turn up the heat on one match weekend and turn be the reverse of that in the subsequent fixture. In any case, this run of form tells you just as much that they lost to Brentford by 3-2, and this was at St James's Park. Went away to a shambolic Tottenham Hotspurs and beat them by 2-1 before playing away to the Etihad Stadium, where in a spirited fight they lost by 2-1. They then returned home and lost to Everton by 3-2 before beating up Man United by 2-1. So that run of results is what tells you how hot and cold they've been. One moment, you watch them, you enjoy them, they look good, they look like they can beat up against anybody, then the subsequent game they're losing. Now, Chelsea has a fairly good record against this Newcastle side, because when you look at the last 5 fixtures, Newcastle has only won 1. There's been 1 draw, which was a 2-all draw earlier on this season. That was back in December on the 20th. And then you'll find that, Newcastle has won twice in the last 5. Chelsea have won twice. Because last season, Chelsea, still pursuing a Champions League place, went to St James's Park and got beat by 2-0. Nicholas Jackson got a red card in that one. But at Stamford Bridge, that's where Chelsea tend to stand tall. Because Newcastle's victories against Chelsea have come at home, and so was the 2-all draw earlier on this season, just as much as Chelsea's victories against the same opponent have come at home. Like I said, for those of you that were part of our conversation last night, we did assess how we think Premier League teams, we did assess the chances of Premier League teams advancing to the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League. Whereas the results are far from convincing, some teams have a chance. Some have a big chance, others have a slim chance, depending on how you look at it. Chelsea's chances are quite low because they are up against the reigning champions and they lost by 5-2. Whereas winning by 3-0 in normal time could send their game in extra time or even post-match penalties, where you'd give them a 50-50 chance. The question of them scoring those 3 or 4-1, it's not too hard to think about, but defensively, they're not good enough not to concede goals. I don't know how Liam Rosenior is going to approach this game. He had his goalkeeper commit an error, and that was Felipe Jorgensen, especially, I think, leading to the 3rd goal that is scored by Vitinha. And yet he was brought in the Aston Villa game after Robert Sanchez had an underwhelming performance against Arsenal. So there's a bit of a selection headache for him there. Then when it comes to the back line, do you switch things up and keep players fresh for the Champions League game? I would be of the argument or of the view that you do not take that kind of gamble, because you then put yourself at the risk of losing this game for not fielding your best team. And there's no guarantees that those that you may have rested will give you the performance of a lifetime against PSG to knock PSG out. Whereas it is still a possibility that you can knock PSG out, it should not come at the expense of you losing to Newcastle because of what this game means in the pursuit of a top 4 finish. In other words, I expect Liam Rosenior to go with his strong starting 11. I'm under the suspicion that we could see a return of Robert Sanchez in goal. That Malo Gusto will be at right back, Kukurea at left back, Wesley Fofana and Trevor Chalobah, or maybe he makes a slight switch in one of those two, and maybe Wesley Fofana is dropped out for Mamadou Sarr or somebody else. Reece James starting in midfield, I do not think so. I think he could be a rested player, and then he starts with Moises Caicedo alongside Andre Santos, Enzo Fernandez, Cole Palmer. No, maybe Garnacho, Neto, and Joao Pedro. That's how you could set up They'll come up against a Newcastle side that is really, really motivated following their performances against Man United and against Barcelona. Whereas they did not win against Barcelona, eventually, they were very, very proud of their performance. And they will need that. I don't know why my head is suddenly itching. Jesus Christ. It's like I have dandruff, and yet it's not dandruff. An itchy scalp. Perhaps I need some hair oil. Anyways, jokes aside. So, Newcastle, on the other side, they have players that are capable of going to Stamford Bridge and winning a game of football. Aaron Ramsdale in goal. I don't think that's going to be changed. Kieran Trippier had to be substituted off. So I'd go with him, starting with Tino Livramento. Lewis Hall had a man of the match performance against Barcelona in that left back role. Danban alongside Malik Thiaw in the back line. Sandro Tonali, Joe Ellington, Joe Willock to start in that midfield because Jacob Ramsey is suspended. Then up front, you'd go with Anthony Gordon, did not start against Barcelona. You'd go with Nick Voltmada, his return from illness. And who else? Harvey Barnes? Maybe? In that sort of setup. The midfield battle would be an interesting watch if Bruno Guimaraes was available. I do not know if he's not, but last I checked, he had a hamstring injury he was dealing with. So, my prediction is going to go Chelsea's way to win by 2-1. I think they'll be motivated enough to win that game by 2-1. Moving on, Manchester City in the late kickoff at 11 p.m. play against West Ham. I do not know if there's anything I can say about West Ham to make you feel encouraged that they will win against Manchester City. There's not a single one of it. When you look at West Ham's last encounters against Man City, in addition to the 3-0 loss in the first leg at the Etihad Stadium, you'll find that in 5 fixtures, they've shipped in approximately, 16 goals and scored only 4. Because a 3-0 loss this season, last season they lost home and away by 4-1 and 3-1. That's 7 goals scored against them and only 2 in response. And the season prior to that, they had conceded 6 in 2 fixtures, 3-1, 3-1. In other words, if there's one thing you can almost count on about this West Ham side, is to almost score or to almost always score against Manchester City. But winning a game of football against Man City is as a mystery as you'd think of it. In fact, in general, there's been 49 meetings in the Premier League between the two sides, and West Ham have only won 1. There have been 8 draws, and Manchester City have won the fixture 32 times. Now, Pep Guardiola, like I told you, will be looking for his team to recover from that embarrassment of a performance that they had against Real Madrid in the UEFA Champions League. And the only way to recover from that is by winning a game of football. Gianluigi Donnarumma in goal, Ryan Atonori at left back, Matheus Nunes at right back, Joško Gvardiol, no, not Joško Gvardiol, Ruben Diaz, and McQuaid at centre back. Midfield, Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante, Bernardo Silva, Ryan Cherki, Savinho, no, sorry, not Savinho, Jeremy Doku, Antoine Semenyo, and Boyd Erling Haaland. That's how I think he will set up. And West Ham will get hammered. West Ham may be called the Hammers, but they're going to use the hammers on them. Because West Ham, first of all, do not know how to defend. They just do not defend well. Like we've seen, they've conceded the second highest number of goals, as many as 54 in the Premier League, with only Burnley having conceded more at 58. Against a team that sometimes almost scores for fun in Manchester City. So, believe you me when I say that even as good as Gerard Bowen can look, like he did at least against Brentford, when they were knocking out Brentford in the FA Cup, after a 2-2 draw, they emerged victorious 5-3 on post-match penalties. But I don't think Gerard Bowen, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Somerville, Castellanos, Matas Fernandes, Thomas Soucek, Konstantinos Mavropanos, Malik Diouf, and the others will be motivated enough, will put up a fight good enough to stop Manchester City. I do not think so. I'm not inclined to believe so. I'm not persuaded to believe so. So I'll go with Manchester City winning the game by 4-1. Yep. They've never won away to West Ham by that margin of scoreline, but I'm going to fancy Man City to win by 4-1. I believe the lineups as presented, Man City is by far stronger. I do not think we'll have a midfield contest good enough. And knowing Pep Guardiola, with the fact or the reality that they are still in the Premier League title race, that really Arsenal have that 7-point advantage over them. They know they have a game in hand. But to make that count, they need to win these first immediate games. And beating up against West Ham is just one of those tasks that they need to accomplish. And I think they will accomplish it this weekend, because I do not see Matas Fernandes, Thomas Soucek, and Magasa getting the better of Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante, Pedro Neto, as well as Brian Chaki. I just do not see it. So basically, that's how I look at it. You know? Then, so yeah, those are the games from Saturday that I wanted us to look at. Because like I said, the Arsenal game, that one will preview it in the night, Friday night, preview show. It comes at 9 p.m. East African time. Then, of course, I think in addition to that, we'll do the Liverpool game, we'll do Man United, among others. So for now, let's look at Crystal Palace against Leeds United. Crystal Palace, having beaten up against Tottenham Hotspurs, they are fairly okay. They are up against the Leeds United side, whose fears about relegation are still alive, that need to go and win the game of football. Are they capable? Their performances have been indicative of wanting to win. They have not always won, but at least they've done their best. Now, this can sometimes be a high-scoring fixture if the last two meetings between the two sides are anything to go by, because Leeds won the first leg by 4-1. While when you go back to the 2023-2024 campaign, you'll find a 5-1 victory for Crystal Palace away at Elland Road. Really, they had won the earlier fixture of that season by 2-1. In other words, either side have won two fixtures of the tie in the last 5, with the other going into a draw. At Elland Road, I suspect Leeds United, feeling a little bit fresher than Crystal Palace, who failed to win against Larnaca yesterday in the Conference League, we could have quite the game on our hands. At that small confined Selhurst Park, I want to believe that players like Ampadu, Gabriel Goodmanson, is it Gabriel? Players like Richie James, not Richie James, Daniel James. Players like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, players like Anthony Starch, players like Aronson could sort of inspire Leeds United into a victory against this Crystal Palace side, whose thoughts will be still wondering how they did not win that game yesterday and how difficult it could be going into the reverse fixture, because now the reverse fixture is going to be away from home. Whereas Crystal Palace still have something to fight for in the Premier League, I still feel that Leeds have it all to do, you know? So Christian Richards, Jefferson Lema, Maxence Lekwa. Oh. Is Maxence Lekwa will Maxence Lekwa be returning from suspension? He got a red card in that loss to Man United. Yeah, I think he should be returning because he missed the Tottenham game and then he missed the FA Cup game. So he should be returning. Then Adam Wharton, Taichi Kamada in that midfield. Crystal Palace can be good. Ismail Sarr, Jeremy Pino, Jürgen Strand Larsson, they can be decent. Brennan Johnson, they have a good team. But I believe that Leeds, with all their aspirations, will get the better of Crystal Palace, for who have won 3 of their last 5 fixtures, lost 2, losing to Man United by 2-1 and Burnley by 3-2. Really, Leeds on the other side have done well. Not too well, because their last 2 big games have been defeats at the hands of Man City and Sunderland by 0-0, respectively. Really, prior to that, they had the 1-1 draw against Aston Villa and the 2-1 draw against Chelsea. So their last victory came away to Nottingham Forest by 3-1. They are desperate to return to winning ways. And I think a game against Crystal Palace with the preoccupation in their minds about the UEFA Conference League round of 16 and the desire for them to advance to the quarterfinals could get the better of Oliver Glasner, that they end up losing this game, at least by 2-1. That's my humble prediction for that game. Okay. As we wrap up, let's look at Nottingham Forest versus Fulham. Now, Nottingham Forest are caught between a rock and a hard stone. The results are not going their way in the Premier League, and nor have they gone their way in the last 2 meetings in the UEFA Europa League, where they lost to Fenerbahce by 2-1 at the playoffs before advancing to the round of 16, because they had won the first leg by 3-0. In the Premier League, they are still winless at the hands of Vita Pereira, losing to Liverpool by 1-0, to Brighton by 2-1. Really, they had a heartfelt fought 2-2 draw against Manchester City in their last league outing before losing to Midtjylland yesterday by 1-0. So they're having it really, really difficult. They come up against the Fulham side, who have beaten them in their last 3 consecutive games. And out of the last 5 meetings, Nottingham Forest have only won 1, while Fulham has always handed it to them. Fulham's results in the last 5 include 2 victories against Sunderland 3-1 and away to Spurs 2-1. Really, they lost by 0-0 against West Ham United, by 3-0 away to Manchester City, and 2-1 away to Everton. Sorry, at home against Everton. So Nottingham Forest, I don't know what's going wrong. They have the good players. That performance against Manchester City was indicative of their grit, their desire to fight, their never give up attitude. Elliot Anderson bossing it, Morgan Gibbs-White scoring the cheeky goal, Ola Aina in that back line, Moriro, Milinkovic in that back line. Yesterday, I saw Omar Hudson really, really trying, but could not find the back of the net. Morgan Gibbs-White had an attempt deflected just slightly inches away from target. They put up a fight yesterday. Luck was not on their side because they ended up losing by 1-0. Now, although I would want them to win this weekend, Igor Tudor is not made the sufficient. Sorry, not Igor Tudor. Vitor Pereira. I do not think he's gotten it right in motivating this Nottingham Forest team. So really, the more I look at it, the more I think that Nottingham Forest could lose, at least by 1-0 or by 2-1. But I'll go Fulham to win by 1-0. Yep. Now somebody's thinking to themselves, what do you mean? It's just a prediction. Take it for what it is, not cast in stone. You see, usually when we are predicting some of these games, as you go through the analysis and the review, the preview, there are certain situations that you cannot envision. So, for example, I could not envision that Mickey van de Ven would be that stupid to get himself sent off the manner in which he did against Crystal Palace as they lost by 3-1. That was for Tottenham Hotspur, a game we shall look at perhaps tonight when we look at Liverpool's responsibilities. So it's that bad. So we've looked at Nottingham Forest, Fulham, Crystal Palace, Leeds. I've gone Fulham to win 1-0, Leeds to beat up against Crystal Palace 2-1. We've looked at Manchester City, West Ham for Man City to win 4-1. We've looked at Chelsea versus Newcastle for Chelsea to win by 2-1. We've looked at Sunderland to draw against Brighton, as well as Burnley to draw against Fulham. Now, we have games to look forward to between Arsenal versus Everton. We'll do the preview for Man United versus Aston Villa, as well as Liverpool versus Tottenham Hotspur when we return tonight for the late night preview. So, with that said, I want to send my sincere vote of thanks or shout outs to all our new subscribers that have recently joined the Football Tribe UG community. Like I keep saying, do not just end at subscribing. Do not subscribe and run away, please. Go over to our channel, check out a couple of videos and watch that. Go to our live section and the broadcasts, the live broadcasts, and watch something there. And for those of you that dedicate the time to watch our broadcasts long after they've ended, would not take your sort of love and support for granted. Mosinguzi says, Arteta must win the games tomorrow to keep us in the title race. Good morning, family. Hi, Mosinguzi. Good morning to you too. It's a must win. And I think the story has not changed for what the responsibilities are for Arsenal and Manchester City. And there's no way about it. Every Premier League game Arsenal still have left to play, they must play like it is a final, like their life depends on it. You know? So, like I said, we're dedicating Friday night broadcast in previewing that game alongside with the Man United game and the Liverpool game. So we'll look at 3 games. So I'll give you my larger picture at, in the night broadcast, because I think Mikel Arteta's press conference is due today. So I want to first hear what he has to say, particularly about Martin Odegaard and his availability. And then I would want to see him play with a single pivot. Instead of playing with Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi in the same team, I'd rather he starts Declan Rice and then he plays maybe alongside Ebeleche Eze, maybe a Miles Lewis Kelly in there, or a Martin Odegaard if he's available, or Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, Ebeleche Eze, to have a more attacking side, a more fluid side, really. Hi, Arsenal is winning the Premier League trophy. That's from Ray. Raymond seems to think, or to suggest, or to predict, or to anticipate that Arsenal will win the Premier League title. Well, I say, only time will tell. Only time will tell, because they still have 8 games to prove themselves that they are worthy of being champions. But I do not I don't know whether our captain will be available for tomorrow's game because we missed him in our midfield. Yeah, he's a miss in that midfield, and it's been a very turbulent season for Martin Odegaard with all the injuries and stuff like that. But like I said, I'm hoping that by the time we get to do the preview for that game, which I've promised you, it will be on today night. Usually on Fridays we come early at around 9 or 9:20 thereabout. All factors kept constant. I'd want to think that I'd want to first hear from Mikel Arteta, particularly on how his team situation is, because I'm also of the view that Ben White should start at right back and you give Jurriën Timber a rest, because whereas that game is very important, the game against Bayer Leverkusen could be important just as much for the reverse fixture following that one all draw. So he has something to think about when it comes to thinking about squad rotation and load management, So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Anyways, guys, that's it for me for now. Like I promised, we'll be back on Friday night, which is today night, to go through those games that I promised you. And yeah, so thank you so much, Raymond. Thank you so much, Evans. Thank you so much, Kuna, JFT, Steve Bano, and every single one of you that has been part of this morning's broadcast. Allow me to wish you a wonderful rest of your Friday and the weekend ahead. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.